Welcome, I'm Ananya Datta and I'm back with another edition of Race to Power. Coming up in this broadcast, there are a lot of factors in the United States which could turn the voters right or left. But we are going to bring you a survey tonight that might be a head-scratcher. Young American men are turning conservative because they are frustrated. Now, the war in Gaza has the potential to change election outcomes globally. While we saw that trend in the US primaries, we might see a repeat in UK's general election. Labour is eyeing to unseat the Tories, but a no-condition support for Israel might cost them some seats of Arab voters. Now, the race to the White House is still months away, and here on this show we have been discussing several polls on leadership popularity, voter issues and a slew of other topics. But today we bring you a very interesting third-party survey on voter inclination, particularly among young American men. A large global survey was released a few hours ago, which was conducted to understand the shift in voter mentality among men and women. The results are very interesting indeed and indicate a changing sentiment and political inclination at the global level. The poll has revealed that owing to a sentiment of despair and frustration with regards to the country's political establishment, young men in the US have become more conservative over the past decade. Take a look at the numbers on your screens. We have a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 indicates the liberal left and 5 indicates far right. As per the poll, young men between the age of 18 to 24 years have exhibited a slight shift towards a more conservative mentality. The shift has been recorded between 2014 to 2023. Now, in the past decade, thousands of respondents were asked 43 questions to assess where they ranked in terms of conservative mindset. In order to assess social values, the survey reflected views on several subjects which pertain to patriarchy, gender role flexibility, same-sex marriage, and others. The shift does not come as a surprise. We have in the past few months seen on this very show talked about elections in Europe which have also reflected a more conservative sentiment, with more and more right-wing parties winning the electoral mandate. The question now is, in the great American race to power on November 5th, will a more conservative sentiment reflect out of despair? Or will issues like abortion and foreign policies in times of war have a greater impact on the ballot? Now, the United Kingdom's Labour Party is leading several opinion polls. Party leaders are confident that in the upcoming general elections, they will indeed defeat the incumbent Conservative Party with a huge margin. However, recent polls by analysts claim that the Labour may lose in a number of seats that they are targeting to win. And the main reason behind it could be the party's stance on the Israel-Hamas war. According to a report by The Guardian, Keir Starmer's party will struggle to win at least 10 seats. Experts claim that it could even lose current 2 seats. One senior Labour advisor told The Guardian that the party is losing urban progressive voters and emphasized that some Labour MPs will have to spend more time campaigning in their own seats, which they expected to win. According to an official YouGov survey agency, the anti-Labour feeling among Muslim and young voters could cost seats where the community make up to 10 to 15% of the population. According to official figures, just last month the party lost 23,000 members. Reports claim that Starmer's stance on issues like immigration, economy and the environment has helped to gain the support of older white voters. But those decisions have also upset many traditional Labour voters in urban areas in particular. According to a poll by YouGov, the party has lost popularity in more than 50 seats since the year 2019. The survey came as a total shock for the UK's main opposition party, as the Labour has gained 12 percentage points in the polls since then. Earlier, 10 Labour Frontbenchers opposed the party's leadership. They also voted for an explicit immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war.
From Westminster to the British people.
Let's shift focus now. The skyrocketing prices of goods are the top priority for Greek voters. All polls conducted ahead of this year's all-important European Parliament elections reveal this trend. Now, Greece's average growth rate is more than 2%, which is one of the highest in the Eurozone. The government is praised for its fiscal policies by all European institutions. However, the measures taken against inflation in the food category don't seem to have an impact on the consumers. The Hellenic Statistical Authority has just reported that inflation in the food category stood at 5.3% in March, up from 3.1% in February. Figures like this mean that while measures previously taken by the Greek government have been described as positive, their efficacy and impact is being questioned. Citizens are increasingly voicing their disappointment, and it is estimated that this will also be expressed at the ballot box. Common people say that they are disappointed and that the high prices will affect the Greek government's election performance because they haven't done enough. For weeks now, a wave of anti-corruption protests have taken over Hungary. And in the midst of demonstrations against Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a new challenger has risen, Peter Magyar. Once an ally to Orban, Magyar came in the spotlight in this February when he accused the government of widespread corruption. More than a month later, the same Peter Magyar published a recorded conversation which revealed that the Prime Minister's aides have been trying to interfere in a graft case. The audio recording has since then triggered massive protests against Orban's government, thus paving the way for Magyar to further his political career and be the Prime Minister's official challenger. Now, after carefully placing himself as the anti-corruption crusader in Hungary, Magyar registered a party late on Thursday as the leader plans to run in the European elections. Now, they are scheduled to be held this June. The leader took over the ropes of an inactive party called Tidza, and this will be starting a countrywide campaign next week.
Every day we will go to 6 to 8 big and small towns and villages, just like in the old days. Viktor Orban did when he still dared to go among people and to look into their eyes. We would like to hold events when we will ask the people of Budapest to go to the countryside, breaking the tradition that always the people from the countryside are asked to go to the capital. I would like this campaign to be a kind of get to know your country and have Hungarians living abroad, Hungarians living in Budapest and in the countryside to think together and plan the future.
Now, leaders from the ruling Hungarian Civic Alliance have criticized the move.
When in 2018, Prime Minister Viktor Orban asked me to lead the Prime Minister's office, and we had to find a European Union State Secretary. Then I told him, Magyar, that I consider his wife very suitable for the task. And later on, I considered her very suitable for being a minister too. But I did not consider him to be suitable. My opinion has not changed since.
With less than 2 months to go for European Parliament elections, the polls will be a litmus test for Peter Magyar to assess his ability in challenging the right-wing leader in power. It is also a test for the incumbent, Viktor Orban, whose government is marred with severe allegations of corruption. And speaking of corruption, a series of cases are plaguing the ruling party in Croatia. Croatian Democratic Union has dominated politics in the country since its independence, but they are losing ground with mounting scandals, that too in an election year. Croatia is going to polls next weekend, where Prime Minister Andrej Plenković will bid for a third term. Polls indicate that his Conservative Party is on course to lose its majority in the parliament.
It's certain that we also made mistakes, that there were omissions and there were actions that deviated from our policies' guiding principles. Nonetheless, because Croatian institutions, particularly the judiciary, are independent, the war against corruption was at its height during our term. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a single high-profile case.
This will make space for the Social Democrat-led coalition. Incidentally, this is President Zoran Milanovic's party. The parliament reshuffle will mean a major political shift for Croatia, sure, but also for Europe. The SDP opposes aid for Ukraine, which is a major shift from the majority of EU member states. It seems like Croats are willing to pay that price.
So, the one who comes, and we are not in a hurry, we will have the mandate to form the government with 76 signatures. That will be me, after I resign from the position of president. That's the game I play.
Now, a majority of the people in Croatia are worried about the country's topsy-turvy domestic politics. The downside is that the ruling party is facing corruption and nepotism accusations. But economy-wise, Croatia is outperforming its European counterparts. Just in January this year, the average salary had grown 8.6% since the same month in 2023. And it posted economic growth of 2.8% last year, well above the 27-nation EU average. The political climate in Venezuela is tense. As campaign for the July 28th presidential election have begun, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is eyeing a third straight term. Colombian President Gustavo Petro met with his Colombian counterpart and has offered to mediate political peace in the country. Now, US officials also met with representatives of Venezuelan president to express concerns about the country's electoral process. This secret meeting was held on April 18th, and the deadline approached for the United States to decide whether to reimpose sanctions on Venezuela's oil industry. The Biden administration has vowed to reinstate oil sanctions that it suspended in the month of October. Sanctions relief was meant to incentivize Maduro to ensure that Venezuela's July 28th vote is more competitive than previous elections. However, Maduro's government has been accused of ousting candidates from the opposition. The original candidate from the unitary platform, Maria Corina Machado, has been declared ineligible by the Supreme Court. The National Electoral Council refused to register her designated replacement, Corina Yoris. The ousting of these two candidates provoked strong global reactions, including from its allies, Brazil and Colombia. Now, Indian voters are just days away from casting ballots in the Lok Sabha elections, with religious pluralism emerging as one of the key poll issues. A survey has found that a majority of voters believe that India belongs to all religions equally. A pre-poll survey by the Center for Study of Developing Societies looked at over 10,000 voters across 19 states. An overwhelming majority of respondents, 79% of them, supported the idea that India belongs to all religions equally and not just to Hindus. Showing remarkable support for religious pluralism, they said that India must remain a country where people following different religions can practice their faith freely. Now, this poll comes at a time when leaders are spending their days at campaign rallies and public events, just over a week before voters head to polling stations. As India inches towards the last leg of the campaign trail, the question is, how significant of a role will religion play in voters' minds as they arrive at their final destination, that is, the polling booth? Staying with India, the first phase of polling is going to begin from April 19th. Around 968 million voters are eligible to take part in this massive electoral exercise. Preparations are, of course, in full swing from Himalayas to the southern coast of the country before the Festival of Democracy begins in a week. Let's take a look. We will now slip into a short break. Coming up next, we will bring you an exclusive interview with the Foreign Minister of Taiwan. He answers if China intervened in the island's elections or not. Stay tuned.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at wion.com.
On the next episode of World of Africa, African leaders and global dignitaries mark 30th anniversary of Rwandan genocide as French President Emmanuel Macron receives backlash for stating that France and its allies could have stopped the 1994 genocide but lacked the will to do so. South African government goes hard on corruption just weeks ahead of national polls. Country's parliament speaker is forced to resign. And in an effort to remember and honor Nigerian schoolgirls still missing 10 years after their abduction by Islamist insurgents in Chibok, a film titled Statues Also Breathe is screened. Watch World of Africa at these times on WION. World is One.
The biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered spectacle. WION deciphers the images and the hues. Sifts real performance from rhetoric and noise, claims and counterclaims, populist pitches and hidden truths. Untangling, unraveling this celebration of democracy.
Welcome back. You're watching Race to Power with me, Ananya Datta. For a long time now, the relationship between China and Taiwan has turned increasingly sour. The self-ruled island held its presidential elections in January this year. There were reports and serious allegations of Chinese interference through disinformation campaign during the Taiwan polls. Our diplomatic correspondent Sadhan Sibul spoke with the Taiwanese foreign minister over the threat of disinformation in Taiwan's elections.
Sir, regarding the Mobility Pact, we saw certain comments emerging from Taiwan. We saw certain social media posts as well, which are seen as connected to the Chinese propaganda. If you can perhaps give your perspective on that.
Yes. As I said a little bit earlier, the Mobility Pact is a very good agreement in between Taiwan and India, because India has a lot of very good workers to work overseas. But at the same time, Taiwan needs more workers to come in. And therefore, that is a mutually beneficial type of agreement that all the government officials here would welcome. But at the same time, the Chinese government would like to see that any closer relationship between Taiwan and India are something that they don't want to see. So they unleashed some disinformation campaign against Taiwan. Our security apparatus detected that there was about 1,000 new accounts started releasing all kinds of hatred against Indians, or those comments that would create trouble in between Taiwan and India. But fortunately, the government officials, together with some experts here in Taiwan, are telling the people that these are fabricated by the Chinese government. And I think the majority of the people believe that those comments are not fair to India, and it's also not good for Taiwan. So we quickly quiet down those kinds of vicious attacks against this Mobility Pact. And at the same time, we also try to explain to the Indian friends that those comments are not made by the Taiwanese people. They are fabricated by the Chinese government. And I think our Indian friends understand that now. And talking about disinformation campaign or election interference, we also went through a democratic election in January this year. And there's a lot of interference efforts by the PRC to try to shape the results of the election over here. And disinformation campaign is certainly one of them. But we have been going through a lot of these kinds of vicious attacks already, and therefore, we gained some experience. There's a good saying that whatever doesn't kill you will make you stronger, and that is the case of Taiwan. And because we have learned a thing or two over the election interference or disinformation campaign, cognitive warfare, information manipulation, things like that. And at the same time, India is also going through election. And I'm sure the Chinese would like to play this open environment to shape the minds of the Indian people. And in that sense, maybe it will be good for the two countries to think about possible cooperation in this area so that we can strengthen our guards against the disinformation campaign initiated by the PRC.
Let's shift focus now. Political parties and civil society groups in Mali have united against the ruling military junta's decision to suspend political activities. According to the junta spokesperson, this move was made to maintain public order. Now, this order came after calls for presidential elections and an end to military rule by over 80 political parties and civil groups. Political parties and civil society organizations expressed their shock at the ruling, denouncing it as a serious violation of democratic freedom. Signatories of the statement declared their refusal to accept the decree and vowed to a legal action to this dictatorial move. In a further step, Mali's ruling junta reinforced the decree, instructing media outlets in Mali to cease coverage of political entities' activities across television, print and other platforms. The junta, led by Colonel Assimi Goïta, since the second coup in 2021, had promised to restore democracy by early 2024. Yet, they indefinitely postponed the elections scheduled for February 2024 due to technical reasons. This caused concerns about the democratic progress. Mali has faced instability since the 2020 coup, worsened by a prolonged insurgency by jihadi groups associated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And with that, we're wrapping up this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching with me, Ananya Datta.
the biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered spectacle. WION deciphers the images and the hues